The stars had always watched humanity with cold indifference. But the beings who lived among those stars watched with something far worse. They watched with contempt. The Galactic Conclave had ruled the known universe for 12,000 cycles. They were old when humanity's ancestors were still learning to make fire. They had mapped every star, claimed every resource, written laws that governed trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. When human ships first left Earth and entered their territory, the elder races did not feel fear. They felt annoyance. It was like finding insects in a clean house. For 50 years, humanity tried to prove themselves worthy of respect. They followed every rule. They paid every tax. They bowed their heads when alien officials spoke down to them. Human merchants were forced to use old trade routes while other species took the faster ones. Human colonies were denied the technology that could protect them from solar storms. Human diplomats were made to wait in hallways while representatives from lesser species were welcomed with ceremony. And through all of this, humanity did not fight back. They smiled. They negotiated. They believed that patience would eventually earn them a seat at the table. They were wrong, Admiral. Taiho Park stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, the flagship of Earth's United Fleet. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many funerals. Through the massive windows before him, he could see the border of human space marked by a line of defense stations. Beyond that line lay Conclave territory, where human ships traveled at their own risk. His second in command, Captain Minji Seo, approached with a tablet in her hands. Her face was pale. "Sir, we have received a transmission from the Conclave High Council." Taiho did not turn around. "Read it." Mingi hesitated. She had served under the Admiral for 15 years. She had never seen him lose his temper. But she had also never delivered news like this. The Conclave demands that humanity surrender all colonies beyond our original solar system. They want us to give up our military vessels for inspection and destruction. And they want us to submit to something called cultural reformation. She paused. They say if we refuse, they will take corrective measures. Taiho finally turned. His expression was calm, but his hands were tight fists at his sides. Cultural reformation, he repeated quietly. They want to teach us how to be proper servants. Sir, what should I tell the council? Before he could answer, another officer called out from across the bridge. Admiral, emergency transmission from Earth. Ambassador Unikim has been summoned to Helix Prime for final negotiations. Taiho closed his eyes. Unikim was the best diplomat humanity had ever produced. She had spent 20 years building relationships with alien species who saw humans as nothing more than clever animals. If anyone could find a path to peace, it was her. But Taiho knew something that the politicians on Earth did not want to admit. The Conclave did not want peace. They wanted submission. And submission was something humanity would never give. On the other side of human space, Ambassador Unikim was already preparing for her journey. She stood in her small apartment on Luna Station, packing a single bag. She did not need much. Diplomats traveled light. They carried words, not weapons. Her assistant, a young man named Ji-hoon Choi, knocked on her open door. "Ambassador, your shuttle is ready. But before you go, there is something you need to see." Yuna looked up. Ji-hoon was young, barely 30 years old. He had joined her staff because he believed in her mission. He believed that humanity could earn its place among the stars through patience and wisdom. Now his face held an expression she had never seen before. It was grief mixed with rage. "What happened?" she asked. Ji-hoon handed her his tablet. The screen showed a news report with images that made Yuna's blood turn cold. 3 human cargo vessels had been destroyed at the border. The ships were carrying medical supplies to a struggling colony in the outer systems. There had been no warning, no distress call, just silence and then wreckage. "How many?" Yuna whispered. 312 souls. Civilians. Families. Gi-hoon's voice cracked. "The Conclave Border Patrol claims it was an accident. They say the ships entered restricted space." Yuna stared at the images. She recognized one of the destroyed vessels. It was called the Morning Star. Its captain was a woman named Somi An, who who had delivered her daughter safely through a rebel blockade 10 years ago. Somi had 2 children of her own. Had past tense now. An accident, Yuna said flatly. 3 ships, 300 people, and they call it an accident. She set down the tablet and picked up her bag. Her hands were steady, but inside her chest, something had changed. For 20 years, she had believed that peace was possible, that if humanity just tried hard enough, showed enough patience, demonstrated enough goodwill, the elder races would eventually see them as equals. Now, she understood the truth. The Conclave did not want equals. They wanted subjects. And when subjects became inconvenient, they were disposed of like garbage. Ji-hoon, she said quietly, send a message to Admiral Park. Tell him I am going to Helix Prime as ordered. I will listen to what the Conclave has to say. But tell him to be ready. Ready for what, Ambassador? Yuna walked toward the door. She paused and looked back at her young assistant. He still had hope in his eyes. She wished she could protect that hope, but she knew what was coming, ready for whatever happens next. The shuttle ride to Helix Prime took 3 days. Yuna spent most of that time alone in her cabin, reviewing files and preparing her arguments. But she also spent hours simply staring out the window at the stars. She thought about her daughter, Mira, who was studying medicine on Mars. Mira wanted to heal people. She believed that the universe was fundamentally good, that suffering could be fixed with enough knowledge and compassion. Yuna hoped her daughter would never lose that belief. She thought about the workers on the Morning Star, who had left their families to carry medicine to strangers. They had died for doing something good, and the beings responsible for their deaths were waiting at Helix Prime to demand humanity's surrender. As her shuttle approached the massive station, Yuna made a decision. She would go to the Grand Chamber. She would listen to the Conclave's terms. She would give them one final chance to see humanity as something other than insects to be crushed. But if they failed that test, she would walk away. And she would not look back. The station grew larger in her window, a monument to alien power and ancient arrogance. Yuna straightened her uniform and prepared to face the beings who had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Helix Prime was the largest space station ever built. It floated at the exact center of Conclave territory, a spinning ring of metal and glass that could hold 10 million beings. It had been constructed 3,000 years ago as a symbol of unity among the elder races. Now it served as the seat of galactic government, the place where the fate of civilizations was decided. Ambassador Yuna Kim walked through its golden corridors alone. She had been given no escort, no guide. The message was clear. Humans were not important enough to deserve courtesy. The walls around her were covered with holographic displays showing the histories of the 12 founding species. She saw images of great battles, ancient treaties, and magnificent achievements. There was nothing about humanity. As far as the Conclave was concerned, humans had no history worth remembering. After walking for nearly an hour, Yuna finally reached the Grand Chamber. The doors were 20 meters tall, carved from a single piece of crystal that had taken 1,000 workers 50 years to shape. They opened automatically as she approached, revealing the vast space beyond. The Grand Chamber was designed to make visitors feel small. It worked. The ceiling rose so high that clouds formed near the top. Rows of seats climbed up the walls like steps in an arena, each row filled with delegates from a different species. There were beings with scales and beings with feathers. There were creatures made of living crystal and others that existed as clouds of floating gas. All of them turned to look at Yuna as she entered. 200 pairs of eyes. Some had more than 2. All of them stared at her with the same expression: contempt. Yuna walked to the center of the chamber where a single platform waited. She stepped onto it and faced the highest seat, where High Arbiter Valorix sat in judgment. Valorix was a member of the Dominion, the oldest and most powerful species in the Conclave. He had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his narrow face. His skin was the color of dried blood, and his voice sounded like stones grinding together. "No, the human representative may speak," Velorex announced. Una took a breath. She had prepared a speech. She had practiced it 100 times. It talked about cooperation, mutual respect, and the benefits of welcoming humanity into the galactic community. But looking at the faces around her, she knew that speech would be worthless. They had already made their decision. She could see it in their postures, hear it in the whispers that her translator could barely catch. Arbiter, she began. I have come to discuss the recent demands made upon the United Earth Council. Velorex made a sound that might have been laughter. Discuss. There is nothing to discuss. Human, you have been given terms. You will accept them. The terms are not acceptable, Una replied calmly. You are asking us to abandon colonies where millions of our people have built their lives. You are asking us to destroy our only means of defending ourselves? And you are asking us to submit to a process designed to erase our cultural identity. We are asking you to recognize your place in the natural order, Velorex said. Your species has existed for what? A few 100,000 of your years? We have ruled this galaxy for longer than your planet has had complex life. You are children playing with dangerous toys. We are offering to guide us. Una felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. 3 days ago, your border patrol destroyed 3 human cargo ships. 312 of my people died. They were carrying medicine to sick colonists. Is that how you guide us? By killing our healers? The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then a delegate from another species, a creature with too many legs and clicking mandibles, spoke up. An unfortunate accident. Your ships violated restricted space. They were warned. There was no warning, Una said firmly. I have reviewed the communication logs. Your patrol ships opened fire without any attempt at contact. Are you calling us liars? The clicking creature rose from its seat. You dare to accuse the conclave of murder? Una met its gaze without flinching. I am stating facts. If those facts make you uncomfortable, perhaps you should examine your own actions. The chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of species began speaking at once, their voices creating a wall of sound that her translator could not process. Una stood in the center of it, unmoved. Velorex raised one of his forearms, and the chamber fell silent again. You are bold, human. I will grant you that. He leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. But boldness is not wisdom. Your species has been tolerated because you are useful. Your workers are strong. Your engineers are clever. Your soldiers die without complaint. These are valuable qualities in a servant race. Una felt her jaw tighten. Servant race. There it was. The truth they had hidden behind diplomatic language for 50 years. But servants must know their place, Velorex continued. You have been expanding too quickly, taking resources that belong to others, building weapons that you have no right to possess. This ends now. You will accept the terms we have offered, or you will face the consequences. And what consequences are those? Una asked. Velorex smiled. At least, she thought it was a smile. On his face, it looked like a predator showing its teeth. Your little fleet has perhaps 2,000 warships. The Conclave can assemble 40,000 within a single cycle. Your colonies have no shields that can withstand our weapons. Your people have nowhere to run. He spread his arms wide, gesturing to the assembled delegates. Every species in this chamber has pledged their support. You are alone, human. You have always been alone. Una looked around the chamber slowly. She saw the smugness in their eyes, the certainty that humanity would break, that they would beg and plead and eventually submit, just like every other species before them. For 50 years she had believed that dialogue could change things, that showing patience and good faith would eventually earn humanity respect. Now she understood the truth that Admiral Park had known all along. The Conclave did not respect patience. They respected only power, and they believed humanity had none. She thought about Mira, her daughter, about Captain Somian and the 300 souls who died carrying medicine to the sick, about all the humans who had worked and sacrificed and died trying to earn a place among the stars. Then she straightened her spine and spoke clearly, so that every translator in the room would capture her words. Have made your position clear, High Arbiter? Humanity has heard your terms. We reject them. The chamber went utterly silent. Furthermore, Yuna continued, humanity withdraws from these negotiations. We withdraw from the Conclave Accords. We withdraw from all treaties and agreements that bind us to your authority. Valorix stared at her. For the first time, there was something other than contempt in his eyes. Confusion. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. You have called us servants. You have killed our people and called it an accident. You have demanded our surrender and called it guidance. Yuna stepped off the platform and began walking toward the door. We came to you in good faith. You answered with insults and threats. There is nothing more to discuss. If you walk out of this chamber, Valorix called after her, there will be war. Yuna stopped. She turned back to face him one last time. High Arbiter, you have been at war with humanity since the day we first entered your space. You simply never bothered to tell us. She paused. Now you have. She turned and walked out of the grand chamber. The crystal doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder in the chamber. 200 delegates sat in stunned silence. For 3,000 years, no species had ever walked out of conclave negotiations. No species had ever dared until now. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Humanity had rejected the conclave's terms. Humanity had walked away from peace talks. Humanity had dared to say no. On 1,000 worlds, beings gathered around communication screens and celebrated. The insects had finally shown their true colors. They were cowards, retreating instead of fighting. The conclave would crush them within weeks. The universe would forget that humans had ever existed. High Arbiter. Valorix addressed the full council the day after Yuna's departure. His voice echoed through the grand chamber as delegates cheered. The humans have chosen their fate, he declared. They had the chance to join civilized society. They refused. Now they will learn what happens to those who defy the natural order. He raised his forearms in triumph. I call upon all member species to mobilize their fleets. Within 30 cycles, we will assemble the largest armada in galactic history. We will march to human space, and we will end this threat forever. The chamber roared with approval. 40,000 warships from 9 different species would descend upon humanity like a wave of destruction. The humans had 2,000 vessels at most. The mathematics was simple. This would not be a war. It would be an execution. But far from Helix Prime, in the cold darkness at the edge of human territory, something was happening that the Conclave had never imagined. Fleet. Commander Sun Wuhan stood in a control room buried deep inside an asteroid. The asteroid looked dead from the outside, just another piece of rock drifting through the Kuiper Belt. But inside, it housed one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets. Sun Wu was a quiet man who rarely smiled. He had spent the last 15 years building something that most humans did not even know existed. Now the time had come to reveal it. Sir, his chief engineer reported. We have received confirmation from Ambassador Kim. The peace talks have ended. Protocol Prometheus is authorized. Sun Wu nodded slowly. He had hoped this day would never come, but he had also prepared for it his entire career. Activate all stations, he ordered. Send the signal to every hidden facility. Wake up our sleeping children. Across human space, things began to change. In asteroid belts and empty moons, on stations disguised as mining platforms and cargo depots, lights flickered on for the first time in years. Doors opened. Engines roared to life. Ships that the galaxy did not know existed lifted off from hidden hangars and formed into fleets. The Conclave believed humanity had 2,000 warships. They were wrong. Humanity had been building in secret for 30 years, hiding their true strength behind a mask of weakness. They had 8,000 vessels ready for combat. And these were not ordinary ships. Dr. Yunji Shin watched from her laboratory as the first wave of stealth destroyers uncloaked and joined the growing armada. She was an old woman now, her hair white and her hands unsteady, but her mind was as sharp as it had ever been. She had designed the weapons that these ships carried. Weapons that the Conclave believed were impossible. gravity lances that could crush metal like paper, quantum disruptors that could tear holes in reality itself, antimatter warheads powerful enough to crack a planet. For decades, humanity had been told they were technologically inferior to the elder races. Yunji had let them believe it. She had hidden her greatest achievements behind a curtain of false incompetence. Now that curtain was falling on Earth. Prime Minister Hannah Beek stood before the United Council. The chamber was filled with representatives from every human colony, their faces displaying a mixture of fear and determination. They had all seen the news. They all knew what was coming. My fellow humans, Hannah began, for 50 years, we extended our hand in friendship to the galaxy. We were patient. We were peaceful. We followed their rules and paid their taxes and bowed our heads when they insulted us. She paused. They saw our kindness as weakness. They were wrong. The chamber was silent. Every eye was fixed on their leader. Ambassador Kim gave them a choice. They could have treated us as equals. They could have accepted that humanity has the same right to exist and grow as any other species. Instead, they demanded our surrender. They threatened our destruction. They laughed at us. Her voice hardened. They will not laugh for much longer. She pressed a button on her podium, and the screens around the chamber lit up with images. The hidden fleets emerging from their secret bases. The weapons factories working at full capacity. The soldiers training in facilities that officially did not exist. This is who we really are, Hannah declared. Not servants. Not insects. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon. We are the species that refused to accept limits. Even when the universe told us we were nothing, she looked around the chamber. Meeting the eyes of every representative, the conclave thinks they are going to war with a weak and primitive race. They are going to war with humanity, and humanity does not lose. The chamber erupted in cheers. For the first time in 50 years, humans were not afraid. They were angry, and that anger would shake the foundations of the galaxy. Far away, aboard the UES Indomitable, Admiral Tai-Ho Park received a message from Ambassador Yuna Kim. She was on her way back from Helix Prime, and her words were simple. They laughed when I left the chamber, she wrote. Make sure they remember why they should have listened. Tai-Ho read the message 3 times. Then he called a meeting of his senior officers. Captain Mingi Su was the first to arrive. Behind her came Rear Admiral Dong Min-ru, who commanded the Second Fleet. Commander Ji-Won Nam, Chief of Intelligence. Commodore Soyeon Park, who led the Special Operations Division, and a dozen others, each responsible for a piece of the war machine that humanity had kept hidden for 30 years. The conclave is mobilizing, Tai-Ho announced. Our intelligence suggests they will have a full armada assembled within 30 cycles. 40,000 ships from 9 species. No one spoke. The numbers were overwhelming. Even with their hidden strength, humanity was still outnumbered 5-1. They expect us to fight a defensive war, Tai-Ho continued. They expect us to huddle behind our borders and wait for them to come. They expect us to be predictable. He smiled grimly. We will not give them what they expect. He activated the holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a map of conclave territory with thousands of dots representing their ships and stations. They have spread their forces across their entire territory because they believe they face no real threat. By the time their armada is assembled, we will have struck a dozen critical targets. Supply lines, communication hubs, shipyards. We will be inside their borders before they even realize the war has started. Commander Juan stepped forward. Admiral, our cyber warfare division has been preparing for this moment. We have infiltrated every major conclave network. When you give the order, we can blind them, deaf them, make them unable to coordinate their response. Tai-Ho nodded. Good. What about the stealth fleet? Commodore Soyeon answered. 500 vessels ready for deep strike operations. They can be behind enemy lines within 48 hours. The conclave will not see them coming. They will not see anything until it is too late. The Admiral looked around the room at the men and women who would lead humanity through its greatest trial. They were not the largest species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest or the strongest, but they were human. And humans had a special talent for survival. The Conclave has ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years, Taiho said quietly. They have forgotten what it means to be challenged. They have forgotten that power is not a right. It must be earned. It must be defended. He straightened his uniform. We are going to remind them. The officers saluted as one. The war for humanity's future had begun. The Conclave Armada arrived at humanity's border on the 31st day. 40,000 warships stretched across the darkness of space like a metal ocean. Dreadnoughts the size of cities. Carriers filled with fighter craft. Support vessels carrying enough supplies to sustain the fleet for years. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Admiral Valorix, newly promoted to Supreme Commander of the combined fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human border stations through his telescope screen. They looked small, pathetic, a thin line of metal and light standing against the greatest armada ever built. Send the final transmission, he ordered. Tell them to surrender now, and we will show mercy. His communications officer complied. The message went out across all frequencies. Surrender or be destroyed. A simple choice. There was no response. Only silence. Valorix smiled. Let them be silent. Let them hide behind their pathetic defenses. Within hours, those defenses would be dust. All ships advance, he commanded. Destroy everything in our path. The armada moved forward like a wave rolling toward shore. 40,000 ships, their weapons charged, their crews confident. They had never lost a war. They never would. And then the stars began to disappear. At first, no one noticed. The darkness of space was already full of shadows. But Commander Cerise, a young officer on one of the forward destroyers, was watching his sensor screen carefully. He saw the blips vanish. 1, 2, a dozen. Sir, he called to his captain, we are losing sensor contacts. Equipment malfunction, the captain replied dismissively. These human systems are primitive. Interference is expected. But Cerise kept watching. More blips disappeared. Not equipment, ships. Entire vessels were vanishing from his screen without any indication of attack. Then the first explosion lit up the darkness. A conclave carrier erupted into flame with no warning. No enemy fire detected. No incoming missiles. Just sudden, total destruction. Then another carrier, then a dreadnought. Fire bloomed across the armada, like flowers opening in spring. Valorix stared at his display in disbelief. What is happening? Where is the enemy? We cannot detect them, Supreme Commander. There is nothing on our sensors. Nothing at all. That was when the human ships appeared. They came out of nowhere, emerging from stealth fields that should not have existed. Sleek destroyers painted black as space itself. They moved in patterns that no tactical computer could predict, weaving between the conclave vessels like dancers through a crowd, and they were everywhere, Admiral Narration commanded. The first fleet from the bridge of the Soul's Fury, she was a small woman with short gray hair and eyes that had never learned to show fear. She had waited her entire career for this moment. All ships, fire at will, she ordered calmly. The human fleet unleashed its weapons. Gravity lances reached out and grabbed enemy vessels, crushing them like empty bottles. Quantum disruptors tore holes in the fabric of space, pulling ships apart at the molecular level. Antimatter warheads turned proud dreadnoughts into expanding clouds of glowing gas. The conclave armada fell into chaos. Their formation shattered as captains tried to evade enemies they could not see. Ships collided with each other. Friendly fire cut down vessels that were trying to retreat. The communications channels filled with screaming in 100 different languages. On the bridge of his flagship, Valorix was shouting orders that no one could follow. Reform the line. Target the enemy ships. Where are they? Why can we not see them? His officers had no answers. They had trained for war against predictable enemies who fought according to established tactics. Humanity was not playing by any rules they understood. The human fighters were the worst. Swarms of small craft poured out of carriers and attacked with a coordination that seemed impossible. They did not fly in formation. They flew in patterns generated by chaos mathematics, each pilot following an algorithm that looked random but was precisely calculated to avoid enemy fire while maximizing damage. Commander. Wujin Kong watched from a secure facility far behind the front lines. His cyber warfare division had spent years preparing for this moment. Every conclave network had been infiltrated. Every communication system had been compromised. And now he was using that access to tear the enemy apart from within. Take down their coordination network, he ordered his team. Make sure no ship can talk to any other, as hackers went to work. Across the Armada, communication systems failed. Targeting computers went blind. Navigation systems gave false readings. The conclave ships were alone, each one fighting its own desperate battle without support or guidance. 6 hours after the battle began, it was over. 12,000 conclave ships had been disabled or destroyed. The rest were fleeing back toward their own territory, their crews too terrified to continue fighting. Human casualties numbered 47 vessels, less than 1% of the enemy's losses. It was the greatest military defeat in galactic history, Admiral. Nari stood on her bridge and watched the enemy retreat. There was no joy in her eyes, only grim satisfaction. Signal all ships, she said. Pursue at standard speed. Do not allow them to regroup. The human fleet surged forward, chasing the broken remnants of the Armada that had come to destroy them far away. In the grand chamber of Helix Prime, High Arbiter Valorix received the reports in stunned silence. He had expected total victory. He had received total disaster. It is impossible, he whispered. They are primitives. They cannot have weapons like this. They cannot fight like this. His advisors had no answers. Everything they believed about Huma. Nidhi had been wrong. The humans had hidden their true strength. They had let the galaxy underestimate them. And now that underestimation was costing the Conclave everything. Valorix sent an emergency. Transmission to all member species. Request immediate reinforcements. The humans are not what we believed. We need every ship, every soldier, everything we have. But the reinforcements could not come. Humanity's cyber warfare division had done its work too well. The Conclave could not coordinate. They could not communicate. Each species was isolated, unable to reach its allies. Uncertain whether the war was already lost, and humanity kept advancing. Over the next 3 weeks, the human fleet struck target after target. Shipyards that had built warships for centuries were destroyed. Supply depots were captured or burned. Communication stations were silenced. The Conclave's mighty empire was being taken apart piece by piece. On a dozen worlds, populations watched in horror as human ships appeared in their skies. They expected the worst. They expected revenge for 50 years of mistreatment. They expected fire and death and destruction. Instead, the humans sent a single message. We do not seek your destruction. We seek only justice. Remain peaceful, and no harm will come to you. Most chose peace. The few who did not learned quickly that humanity's mercy had limits. Admiral Taiho Park led the final assault on the Conclave's core systems. His fleet numbered 3,000 ships now, reinforced by vessels that had been held in reserve. Ahead of him lay the heart of the Elder Race's power. Behind him lay the wreckage of their pride. He received a transmission from Ambassador Unikim, who was following the fleet aboard a diplomatic vessel. Admiral, the Conclave has requested a ceasefire. They want to negotiate. Taiho considered this for a long moment. 3 months ago, these beings had demanded humanity's surrender. They had laughed at the idea of treating humans as equals. They'd killed innocent people and called it an accident. Now they wanted to negotiate. Tell them we will meet at Helix Prime, he replied. They can negotiate our terms. Yuna's voice was steady. And what are our terms, Admiral? Taiho looked out at the stars that humanity had fought so hard to reach. Stars that the elder races had tried to keep from them. Stars that now belonged to everyone. Our terms are simple, he said. The galaxy will never treat humanity as servants again. And if they forget that lesson, we will teach it to them once more. 3 months after the war began, Ambassador Yuna Kim walked through the corridors of Helix Prime for the second time. The station looked different now. The golden walls were dimmed. The holographic displays showing the glory of the elder races had been turned off. Guards from the conclave species stood aside as she passed. Their eyes fixed on the floor, they did not look at her with contempt anymore. They looked at her with fear. Yuna did not take pleasure in their fear. She took no joy in victory. She had spent 20 years trying to build peace. And now she was walking through the ruins of everything she had believed in. But sometimes she understood now. Peace must be earned through strength before it can be maintained through wisdom. The Grand Chamber was not empty this time. 200 delegates from the elder races sat in their seats, but there was no arrogance in their postures. They looked like what they were, the leaders of a defeated civilization, waiting to hear their fate. But Yuna was not alone either. Behind her came representatives from every human colony, scientists and soldiers, engineers and artists, teachers and healers, the survivors of 300 years of struggle among the stars. Admiral Taiho Park walked at her right side. Prime Minister Hanabeek walked at her left. And behind them came Dr. Yoonji Shin, Fleet Commander Sun Wuhan, and all the others who had helped humanity survive. They walked to the central platform. The same place where Yuna had stood alone just 3 months ago. Now she stood with her people. High Arbiter Valorix was still present, but he no longer sat in the highest seat. That seat was empty. He stood among the other delegates, stripped of his rank and his power. His 4 eyes watched Yuna with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Resignation. "The human delegation is recognized," said the ceremonial announcer, his voice trembling slightly. Yuna stepped forward. She looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of every species that had once looked down on humanity. Then she began to speak. 3 months ago, I stood in this chamber and listened to your terms. You told me that humanity must surrender its colonies. You told me that we must destroy our ships. You told me that we must submit to your reformation of our culture. She paused. You called us servants. You called us insects. You laughed when I walked away. The chamber was completely silent. Then you sent your armada to destroy us. 40,000 ships against our 2,000. You expected an easy victory. You expected us to break. You expected us to beg. She shook her head slowly. We did not break. We did not beg. And now you are here, not to dictate terms, but to receive them. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. Most simply looked tired. But we did not come here for revenge, Yuna continued. We did not fight this war because we wanted to rule the galaxy. We fought because we wanted what every species deserves: respect, fairness, the right to exist without fear. She gestured to the men and women standing behind her. These are the people who built our weapons. These are the soldiers who flew our ships. These are the leaders who guided us through the darkest time in our history. They could have destroyed you. They could have burned your worlds and scattered your civilizations to the void. They chose not to. Dr. Yoonji Shin stepped forward. Her voice was soft but clear. I designed weapons capable of cracking planets. We never used them against civilian populations. We never targeted hospitals or schools. We never killed except in battle. Admiral Narayun spoke next. My fleet could have pursued your retreating ships until none remained. We let them go. We gave them the chance to live that you never gave our cargo vessels. Commander Wu Jinkong added, we controlled your communication networks for weeks. We could have spread chaos and fear among your populations. Instead, we sent messages of peace. We told your people that they had nothing to fear from us if they remained calm. Yuna watched the delegates as her people spoke. She saw surprise in their eyes, confusion. They had expected conquerors who would treat them the way they had treated others. They did not understand mercy from strength. You do not understand us, Yuna said. Even now, after everything that has happened, you do not understand who we are. So let me explain." She took a deep breath. "Humans are violent. We will not deny this. We have fought wars among ourselves since the beginning of our history. We have done terrible things to each other. But we have also learned from our mistakes. We have built systems to prevent tyrants from ruling forever. We have created laws that protect the weak from the strong. We have struggled, generation after generation, to become better than we were." She pointed to the empty highest seat. "You built a galaxy where power was everything, where the strong took what they wanted and the weak suffered in silence. You maintained your rule through fear, not justice. And when a new species arrived that didn't outfit your expectations, you tried to crush them rather than welcome them." Her voice hardened. "That is why you lost. Not because we were stronger. Not because we were smarter. You lost because you could not imagine a universe where might does not make right. And that failure of imagination cost you everything." High Arbiter Valorix spoke for the first time. His voice was hoarse. "What do you want from us?" Yuna looked at him. She saw the being who had demanded humanity's surrender. The being who had laughed at her plea for fairness. The being who had sent an armada to destroy her people. She did not see a monster. She saw a relic. A product of a broken system that had taught him that cruelty was natural and compassion was weakness. "I want what I have always wanted," she replied. "A galaxy where no species is treated as inferior because of when they evolved or where they come from. A galaxy where disputes are settled through dialogue, not destruction. A galaxy where the strong protect the weak instead of preying upon them." Admiral Taiho stepped forward and placed a data chip on the podium. "These are the terms of the Terran Accords. They establish a new framework for galactic governance. Equal representation for all species regardless of age or power. Independent courts to settle disputes fairly. An end to trade restrictions and technology barriers. And consequences for those who violate the rights of others." He looked around the chamber. "You will have one cycle to review these terms. Then you will vote to accept or reject them. If you accept, we will work together to build something better than what came before. If you reject them, we will withdraw from galactic affairs entirely. You will never see another human ship in your space. You will never benefit from our trade or our technology. And you will spend the rest of your existence knowing that you had the chance to be part of something greater, and you chose to remain in the darkness." The delegates stirred uneasily. Isolation from humanity was not what they feared. They feared what humanity might do if provoked again. Yuna spoke one final time. "I know you are afraid of us now. Good. You should be afraid. But understand this. We do not want to be your masters. We do not want to rule over you the way you tried to rule over us. We want partners, allies, friends, if such a thing is possible." She turned and began walking toward the door. Her delegation followed. "Consider carefully," she said over her shoulder. "This is the last chance the galaxy will have to choose a better path." As the human delegation left the Grand Chamber, a young attach named Hyun-jung walked beside Yuna. He was barely 25 years old. Born on the colony of New Busan, raised in a universe where humanity was always the underdog. Now he was watching the most powerful beings in the galaxy tremble before his people. "Ambassador?" he asked quietly. "Do you think they will change? After everything that has happened, can they really become different?" Yuna watched the stars through the station window. The same stars that had seemed so hostile when she first arrived. The same stars that now held the promise of something new. "They will change," she said, "because now they understand what we have known all along." "What is that?" She smiled faintly. It was not a smile of triumph. It was the smile of someone who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. That peace is not weakness, but mercy from the strong is not something to be tested twice. 2 days later, the conclave voted. Every species accepted the Terran Accords. Not because they wanted to. Not because they believed in the principles humanity had outlined. They accepted because they understood. Finally, humanity was not a species to be dismissed or destroyed. Humanity was a species that remembered, and the galaxy would never be allowed to forget. In the years that followed, new stations were built. New treaties were signed. Old enemies became reluctant partners, and eventually, genuine allies. The galaxy did not transform overnight. Change never comes that quickly. But it came, and at the center of it all were the humans. The late arrivals, the underdogs. The species that had refused to accept its place in the natural order because they had never believed in natural orders to begin with. Ambassador Luna Kim retired to a small house on Luna Station, where she could watch Earth rise over the horizon every morning. She spent her final years writing a history of the Contact War, hoping that future generations would learn from both the mistakes and the triumphs. Admiral Taiho Park became the first human to serve on the new Galactic Security Council. He worked to ensure that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and destruction, and throughout human space. In schools and homes and gathering places, people told the story of how humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction and pushed back harder, how they had turned the contempt of the galaxy into respect, how they had proven that the stars belonged to everyone willing to reach for them. The galaxy had made a grave error when it underestimated humanity. It would never make that error again.